The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild finally has a new trailer for its sequel. And today, me and you, we're gonna take a dive into that trailer to show you all the things you probably missed on your first watch of it. Let's begin. The trailer starts off pretty simple. All we see is some malice, and it's growing or expanding in some way, which matches what we know from the previous teaser where we saw that the malice was growing and expanding and eventually ate that poor mouse. Except this time, now we're seeing that it's a lot more dangerous than just killing mice. Now in the next scene, we have a very brief shot of Link clutching his arm as he's being infected by malice, which, if that is the case, is a huge no-no and would be really bad. If his arm is infected by malice, then he can't wield the Master Sword, which is the bane of evil. By being infected by malice, it in a weird way makes him evil and makes him unable to use the blade anymore. And that of course explains why the Master Sword does not appear for the rest of the trailer. In the next scene, we got a really nice body shot of Ganon himself. We see that he's got holes in his body, like under his ribcage and in his hand. He's still wearing that Gerudo jewelry, so presumably that hasn't changed since the last teaser. But something different that we haven't really seen a lot of is his belt. He has a very strange symbol keeping his belt together, which might be connected to the Zonai. On the other hand, I might just be overthinking this. Right after that, we see that Zelda is falling to her doom, unfortunately deep, deep into the ground, and nobody is able to reach out and save her. The fact that she's falling into the ground is also rather spooky, since a lot of the things in the trailer are rising, such as islands and Hyrule Castle, but Zelda's falling, and we see, later in the trailer, that a lot of malice is stemming from the ground. So will Zelda be infected by malice? We'll have to wait and see. I will also mention that it doesn't look like she's going to be playable. It looks like she's going to be another damsel in distress that we need to save. Alright, so now we're done with the first part of the trailer. Whereas the beginning seems very gritty and scary, the rest of the trailer is quite triumphant. On that note, let's take a look at this first shot where Link is falling from the sky. Link's appearance is super different from before. He has a green toga on, he has some I guess a skirt, he has a burnt arm, he's wearing sandals, and he has tattoos on his shoulder and on his back. And his hair is short, just like Zelda's. The Reddit user known as Hostain pointed out that the green on his outfit is very similar to the green that we see on the tapestry in Breath of the Wild, where Link is holding a sword and has some green mixed in with his outfit. Keep an eye out for the fact that this is the only outfit we see when Link is in the sky. For the rest of the trailer, Link is always wearing his champion's tunic, which is when he's on the ground. That could mean that you're forced to wear this outfit when you're in the sky, or it could mean that Nintendo's just being kind of artistic and is showing off the outfit. Regarding the island that Link is floating towards, it seems like it's got a lot of yellow trees, ruins, and a little house on the top of it. It's also connected by a very narrow stretch of land to another island, or maybe there's a gap in the middle. It's a little hard to tell from this angle. The animation that Link is using here with his arms out is very similar to what we would see in Skyward Sword. One more thing to note before we move off from this shot, there is a building in the background, which I think is similar to one that we see later in the trailer, so we'll talk about it more when we get there. At 30 seconds in, we get to a new clip of Link. We can see that he has a fancy new paraglider, which has a Rito symbol on the top of it, but otherwise is completely different. There is a shield on Link's back, which has a fancy eye symbol, which I would say looks very similar to the Eye of Vati, which is a symbol that's been reoccurring in the Zelda series. It very much looks like Vati's eye, although turned upside down. And then we also see that he's wearing sand boots, which is different from the outfit he was wearing earlier, which looked more like sandals. In the distance, we see that structure I was talking about earlier. It looks similar to Ganon's castle from the Wind Waker, although I am doubtful it is the same. It's probably a completely different structure that we have no knowledge about at this point. The fact that we never get a good glimpse at it indicates it's probably super important. It's just something we can't learn more about until we're closer to the game's release. There are also a bunch of smaller structures aside from this one. I mentioned there was a possible house earlier, but we also see a lot of Shinto-looking structures, those Shinto shrines, if you will. Now the big question is, where did these islands come from? Are they from somewhere on the surface? Maybe. Or are they from somewhere underground? We won't really know until the sequel comes, but it's fun to speculate on, and I'm sure there will be lots of videos coming in the near future about it. Now at about 35 seconds in, we get another great picture of Link wandering through the islands, but this time he's on the surface. There is wildlife in the form of birds, and there are ruins to explore, which really gets me excited because I love me some ruins. And hey, remember those Shinto gates I was talking about earlier? It looks like they're at the ends of islands or on the edges of islands, so they're probably tied in some way to teleportation, travel, or getting from island to island. Now in the next scene, we get a very peculiar shot of a robot that's powered by this teal energy that we've seen before. On the top of it, there is that eyeball again, the one that looks like Vati, but upside down, and its earrings have the same design. It's not infected by malice, so it's possible that it's a friendly robot, although the fact that its eyes look similar to Vadi has me on edge, since that was a villain in a lot of the previous Zelda games. Of course, there's a tiny symbol that's on its chest, but it doesn't look like anything we've seen in the past, so it's probably going to be a new symbol that we're going to be introduced to in this game. And then lastly, we gotta look at those ruins in the background. They look heavily inspired by the same architecture that we saw in Breath of the Wild that was linked to the Zonai. The Zonai being the tribe that was referenced in Breath of the Wild all the time, but never actually got shown in the game. Maybe this is a Zonai dude. Next up, Link is paragliding around a stone talus with a encampment of monsters on its back. These are very clearly bokoblins, but they look different from last time since they have larger horns. Link's outfit in this scene looks very similar to what we would have seen in Breath of the Wild, with the difference of him having a modified version of the champion's tunic and his paraglider being vaguely different. In the background is Death Mountain, which looks a little bit more dormant than usual. There's no smoke cloud or no divine beast on it, so that probably has changed. One more thing to note about this is I love the idea of using the enemies that are already in Breath of the Wild, but combining them together to make combat more interesting. At about 40 seconds into the trailer, Link's hand is once again being infected by something, but this time, instead of it being malice, it seems to be this bluish, greenish energy. Beside him is a collection of letters on this, stone surface. I tried to decipher them, seeing if they were Gerudo or Hylian, but I don't actually think they're part of a language that we know. We're going to have to wait for Nintendo to translate whatever these symbols mean. If you'll allow me to put on my speculation hat for a second, it's possible that this teal material is some form of energy that is meant to purify Link's hand since it was infected by malice earlier in the trailer. If that's the case, then it's likely that the robot from earlier is good, because the teal energy is also resonating inside of that robot. In this scene, we see that Link is in a very rocky, mountainous area, probably in Eldin, and is being attacked by a horde of monsters who have a spike ball in front of them. But Link has a fancy magic ability here, which reverses the direction of the ball, probably being some time reversal spell. Nowhere in the trailer do we see Sheikah runes or a Sheikah slate, so this probably is one of the utilities that Link is going to be given that will be a replacement for that. And hey, did you see that? The power is coming from his hand, not from a slate or a tablet. In the background, you can see a moblin, but he looks a little different than before. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, they had long horns, in this game, they're wearing skulls or a helmet on their head. It's clear that Link is attacking a fairly large encampment of monsters, one that we have not seen before. So it's safe to assume that many of the encampments that we already encountered in Breath of the Wild are now going to be in new locations. Now here we are, the worm battle scene. This is a pretty strange one. Both Link and this monster that he's fighting are underground, which is highly exciting. I love underground areas in Zelda games. And it seems like this is going to be a boss or a mini-boss of sorts. We only get one good look at this monster before Link starts setting it on fire, but it seems to be very wormy-like. I was going to relate it to Goma from the Wind Waker, but honestly, it's so unique. I don't think we have anything in the series that quite looks like this. We also have to talk about Link's shield. It looks like a standard shield, but it has some weird dog-like figure on the front of it that spews fire. Since this was shown right after a scene where they showed some magical hand ability, it's quite possible that this will also be a magical hand ability that you can apply to shields. Alternatively, this could just be a completely new item, one which has the gargoyle on it at all times. And now we're at that weird shot where the water droplet is flowing upward from the ground instead of downward. I don't think that this water shot is very interesting in and of itself, but what is interesting is what happens right afterwards, because it seems to be tied to the action of Link flowing up to the sky. He's making a diving motion, which is very much tied to water, and he flows into the ground and then flows out of it with a water effect around him as he's in the rocks. I suspect that this will be some form of teleportation of helping Link get from the ground to the sky areas in the game. Once again, to the right, we see that there is a structure that is very Zonai based, and if you look at the surface, you'll notice there is the Gerudo Highlands, and then right below Link is the Ridgeland region with the mushroom trees. You might be able to make a connection between the music in the background at this section and the Uku tribe from Twilight Princess, since both of them have a kind of melodic but also creepy and garbled feel to them. And then at the tail end of the trailer, we get a glimpse at, poor Hyrule Castle, getting ripped up from the ground and getting destroyed once more. In this shot, it's not very important, but that is where Zelda's chamber is in Breath of the Wild. And then we get a glimpse of the malice rising from the ground, which might be where Zelda is because she did fall into the ground. It also seems like this malice is responsible for moving the castle, and that Ganon might in some weird way be using it again as a headquarters for his evil operations. And then we end on this shot. of Hyrule Castle and the areas around it. Weirdly, there are no islands in the sky, which might mean that getting to the islands in the sky happens with some time travel mechanic, or that they're only in a certain section of the game and we're not looking at it. To the bottom left is a skull fort, one which usually is not there, and the music in the background is reminiscent of the theme for the dragons in Breath of the Wild. Shout out to Nom Nom Zombies for figuring that out on Reddit. Although there is no name given at the very end of the trailer, we do have a date, 2022. Since we're not getting an exact date for this, I think it's more likely that this will be released in the summer or the fall. Keep in mind, after this was released, they said that they would like to release it by 2022, so don't take this as the end-all be-all. We need to be flexible to let Nintendo take their time when making this game. And that concludes our analysis on the latest trailer for the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like the video if you learned something new, or surf through our little channel here to find more videos about The Legend of Zelda. Until I see you next time, have fun storming the castle.